In the blistering heat of 1887 Arizona territory, the town of Dusty Springs was nothing more than a collection of weathered wooden buildings clinging to existence in the middle of an unforgiving desert. It was the kind of place where desperate men came to disappear, and where the law was whatever the man with the fastest draw said it was. The town survived on the occasional cattle drive passing through, and the miners who still believed there was gold in the surrounding hills, despite years of evidence to the contrary. On this particular scorching afternoon, a silent drifter rode into town on a tired gray horse. The man was known simply as Cole, though few knew even that much about him. He was tall and lean, with eyes the color of winter steel and a face weathered by years of sun and hardship. Cole never spoke unless absolutely necessary, communicating mostly through nods and gestures. Some said he'd lost his voice in the war. Others whispered he'd taken a vow of silence after killing a man in a duel gone wrong. The truth, like most things about Cole, remained a mystery. Cole had been a cowboy, a soldier, a scout, and a dozen other things in his 40 years. He'd ridden with cattle drives from Texas to Montana, fought in skirmishes with various tribes and outlaws, and seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. Now he just wanted to find a quiet piece of land where he could raise a few horses and live out his remaining years in peace. He'd heard there might be work at a ranch outside Dusty Springs, which was why he found himself in this godforsaken town. As Cole dismounted in front of the general store, he noticed a commotion in the town square. A crowd had gathered around what appeared to be an auction of sorts, though it wasn't the usual livestock or property being sold. Cole's jaw tightened when he realized what was happening. A woman was being auctioned off, a practice that, while not exactly legal, wasn't uncommon in lawless frontier towns where women sometimes became commodities. The woman sat on the dusty ground, her posture proud despite her circumstances. She was clearly Apache, dressed in traditional buckskin clothing that, despite being worn and dusty, was intricately decorated with beadwork. Her long black hair was braided, and she wore a beaded headband with a single eagle feather. What struck Cole most were her eyes, dark and defiant, burning with an inner fire that suggested she had not been broken by whatever circumstances had brought her to this degrading situation. The auctioneer, a fat man named Crude Bill who ran the local saloon, was shouting to the sparse crowd. "Come on now, gentlemen. A genuine Apache woman. Good for cooking, cleaning, whatever other work you might need done. She don't speak much English, but she understands orders well enough. We'll start the bidding at $5. The crowd was small, a few drunk miners, some ranch hands, and a couple of rough-looking characters who clearly had unsavory intentions. Most of the town's decent folk had made themselves scarce, unwilling to participate or even witness such a shameful spectacle. $5, called out one of the miners, a toothless man who swayed on his feet. $5.50, countered a ranch hand with a cruel smile. Cole stood at the edge of the crowd, his hand resting on the worn grip of his Colt revolver. Something about the woman's bearing, the way she held her head high despite her humiliation, stirred something in him. He'd seen too much injustice in his life, participated in too much violence. Maybe this was a chance to do something right for once. The bidding continued half-heartedly. $6. 6 1/4. Cole stepped forward, and the crowd parted instinctively. There was something about his presence, the way he moved, the cold intensity of his gaze, that made even hardened men nervous. He held up 3 fingers. Crude Bill laughed. $3? Friend, the bidding's already at 6 1/4. You're gonna have to do better than that. Cole just stood there, hands still raised with 3 fingers extended, his expression unchanging. Then, slowly and deliberately, he placed his other hand on his revolver. The message was clear. $3 was his offer. Take it or face the consequences. The auctioneer's smile faded. He looked around at the other bidders, but they'd all suddenly found the ground very interesting. Nobody wanted to challenge the silent stranger with death in his eyes. Bill swallowed hard. Well, I suppose, seeing as how there ain't much interest today, $3 it is. Cash in hand. Cole counted out 3 silver dollars and dropped them into the auctioneer's sweaty palm. Then he walked over to the Apache woman and extended his hand to help her up. She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face for his intentions. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she took his hand and rose gracefully to her feet. Without a word, Cole led her to his horse, helped her mount, and swung up behind her. As they rode out of Dusty Springs, he could feel the eyes of the townspeople on his back, but nobody tried to stop them. Once they were out of town, Cole steered his horse toward a small creek he'd passed earlier, figuring they both could use some water and a moment to rest. At the creek, the woman dismounted and knelt by the water, drinking deeply. Cole did the same, keeping a respectful distance. When she'd finished, she turned to face him and spoke in clear, accented English. "You are not like the others. Why did you buy me?" Cole was surprised she spoke English so well, though he didn't show it. He pulled out a small notebook and pencil he carried for communication, writing quickly. "Couldn't stand by. Wrong is wrong." She read the note and studied him again. "You cannot speak?" He shook his head and wrote again. "Lost it years ago." "Doesn't matter. What's your name?" "I am called Ayana. It means eternal blossom in my language." "What do you intend to do with me?" Cole wrote carefully. "Nothing. You're free. Where do you want to go?" For the first time, emotion flickered across Ayana's proud features. Surprise, confusion, and something that might have been hope. "Free. You do not understand what you have done, silent cowboy. Those men, they took me from my people 3 months ago. I am not just any Apache woman. I am the wife of Chief Nate, leader of our band. My husband thinks I am dead. There was a raid on our village by the Mexican army. Many were killed. I was captured and sold multiple times, passed from one trader to another, until I ended up in that terrible town." Cole's eyes widened slightly, the most expression he'd shown. He wrote rapidly, "Chief's wife? This complicates things. He'll be looking for you." "Perhaps," Ayana said, her voice heavy with doubt. "But after 3 months, he may have taken a new wife. He may believe I died in the raid. And even if he still searches, how would he know where to look? I was taken so far from our lands." Cole thought for a moment, then wrote, "I know where Nate's band ranges. Worked as a scout years back. Never fought against Apache if I could help it. Respected them. I can take you back." Ayana looked at him with new eyes. "You would do this? Ride into Apache territory, where you would be seen as an enemy, where they would likely kill you on sight?" Cole simply nodded and wrote, "It's the right thing to do." What followed was a journey that would test them both in ways neither expected. They traveled for days through harsh desert terrain, following routes that Cole remembered from his scouting days. Along the way, Ayana began to open up, telling him about her life, her people, and her fears about what she would find when, if, they made it back. She told him about her childhood, learning the traditional ways from her grandmother. She spoke of meeting Nate, a strong young warrior who would become chief, and their courtship. She described the delicate balance her people tried to maintain, caught between the Mexican army to the south, American settlers and soldiers to the north, and their own desire to live freely on the lands their ancestors had roamed for generations. Cole, in turn, shared his story through his notebook, writing during their evening camps. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, losing his family to raiders during the war, and drifting west. He explained how he'd lost his voice, not in battle as some speculated, but from an infection after being wounded. The doctors had tried to save him, but the damage to his throat was too severe. He could make sounds, but no intelligible words. As the days passed, a strange friendship formed between the silent cowboy and the chief's wife. They developed a rhythm of communication that went beyond his written notes, gestures, expressions, and a growing understanding that transcended words. Ayana taught him Apache words and phrases, and though he couldn't speak them, he learned to understand. Cole showed her tracking techniques he'd learned over the years and taught her to shoot his spare revolver, believing every person should be able to defend themselves. They faced dangers together, a pack of wolves that threatened their camp one night, a group of outlaws who tracked them for 2 days before Cole managed to shake them off, and the constant challenge of finding water in the merciless desert. Through it all, they watched each other's backs, growing to trust one another completely. On the 10th day of their journey, they finally reached the territory where Nate's band was known to range. Cole knew they were being watched long before they saw any Apache warriors. He'd tied a white cloth to a stick, riding with one hand raised in the universal sign of peace. Ayanna rode beside him, her bearing once again that of a chief's wife rather than a captive. The Apache warriors materialized from the landscape as if conjured from the air itself. There were 6 of them, weapons ready, faces hard with suspicion. Then one of them recognized Ayanna. The warrior's eyes went wide, and he spoke rapidly in Apache. The others lowered their weapons slightly, staring in disbelief. Ayanna spoke to them in their language, her voice strong and clear. Cole didn't need to understand the words to grasp the emotion. She was telling them who she was, that she lived, and that she had returned. The warriors looked at Cole with confusion and wariness. Clearly, they couldn't understand why a white cowboy would bring her back rather than keep her or sell her again. The warriors escorted them to the camp, and word spread like wildfire through the village. People emerged from their dwellings, first in disbelief, then in joy. Children ran alongside their horses. Women called out in celebration. And then, from the largest dwelling, a man emerged. Chief Nate was a tall, powerful man in his 40s, with the bearing of someone born to lead. His face was marked with the lines of war and wisdom, and his eyes were sharp and intelligent. When he saw Ayanna, those eyes filled with an emotion so powerful it seemed to stop time itself. For a moment, he stood frozen, as if afraid she was a vision that might disappear. Then Ayanna dismounted and walked toward him, and Nate closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. They embraced, and Cole looked away, feeling like an intruder on a deeply private moment. The entire village erupted in celebration around them, but the chief and his wife only had eyes for each other. Eventually, Nate approached Cole, who had dismounted but stayed near his horse, unsure of his reception. The chief studied him for a long moment, then spoke in heavily accented but clear English. "My wife tells me you bought her freedom for $3 and brought her home, asking nothing in return. She says you protected her and treated her with honor. She says you are a man who cannot speak but whose actions speak louder than the words of 100 men." Cole nodded, accepting the assessment without false modesty. Nate continued, "You have given me back the light of my life. You have restored to our people a woman of wisdom and strength. There is no gift I could give that would equal this, but you are welcome among us for as long as you wish to stay. You have earned the friendship of the Apache, which is not given lightly." Cole pulled out his notebook and wrote carefully, then showed it to the chief. "I seek no reward. Seeing her home safe is enough. But I thank you for your welcome." Nate read the note and smiled, a rare expression on his usually stern face. "You will stay at least for tonight. We will feast, and you will be honored as the man who brought back what we thought was lost forever." That night, Cole experienced Apache hospitality in all its richness. There was food, music, dancing, and storytelling. Ayanna translated for him, her face glowing with happiness to be home. Warriors came to thank him, women brought him gifts of food and handcrafted items, and children looked at him with awe, whispering about the silent cowboy who had done the impossible. As the celebration continued, Nate sat with Cole by the fire. Through Ayanna's translation, they spoke of many things. The changing times, the struggles both peoples faced, the difficulty of maintaining honor in a world that seemed to have little use for it. Cole learned that Nate was a thoughtful leader, trying to guide his people through impossible choices, balancing the desire to preserve their way of life with the reality of overwhelming American expansion. "The world is changing," Nate said, staring into the flames. "Soon, there may be no place for people like us, those who remember the old ways, who value honor and freedom above all else. But we persist. We adapt. We survive. That is what my people have always done." Cole nodded, understanding more than Nate might have guessed. He wrote in his notebook, "Survival is not the same as living. But sometimes it's all we have." Nate read this and looked at Cole with new respect. "You understand. Perhaps you and I are not so different, silent cowboy. Both trying to find our place in a world that has no place for men like us." When Cole finally prepared to leave the next morning, Ayanna approached him with tears in her eyes. "I do not know how to thank you properly," she said. "You gave me back my life, my family, my people. If you ever need anything, if you are ever in trouble, send word. The Apache do not forget their debts." Cole smiled, a rare expression that softened his harsh features, and wrote one final note. No debt. Just one human being helping another. That's how it should be. Nate gave Cole a beautifully crafted Apache knife as a parting gift, along with detailed directions to water sources and safe passage through Apache territory. You may travel through our lands without fear, the chief said. Any Apache warrior who sees this knife will know you are under my protection. As Cole rode away from the village, he looked back once to see Ayanna and Nate standing together, watching him go. They raised their hands in farewell, and he returned the gesture. Then he turned his horse north and rode on, carrying with him the memory of having done something purely good in a life that had seen far too much darkness. The story of the silent cowboy who paid $3 for an Apache woman and returned her to her people became legend in that part of the territory. It was told around campfires and in saloons, growing more elaborate with each telling. Some said Cole was actually an Apache spirit in human form. Others claimed he was a former priest who had taken a vow of silence. The truth, as usual, was simpler and somehow more profound. Cole did eventually find his quiet piece of land, a small ranch in the foothills where he raised horses as he dreamed. From time to time, he would find gifts left at his property line. Deer meat, beautifully tanned hides, hand-woven blankets. He never saw who left them, but he knew. The Apache did not forget. Years later, when Cole was an old man, Ayanna's grandson would visit him, bringing news of the family and stories of how his grandmother had lived a long, full life surrounded by children and grandchildren. The young man told Cole that Ayanna had spoken of him often, calling him the silent one who showed us that honor still exists in the world, even in the most unexpected places. Cole died peacefully at 72, tending his horses until the very end. They buried him on his land with the Apache knife Nate had given him so many years before. At his grave, among the few white settlers who knew him, stood several Apache people who had traveled to pay their respects to the silent cowboy who had reminded them all that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness and courage can echo through generations, that $3 spent for the right reasons could be worth more than all the gold in California, and that true heroes are often the ones who speak the least and do the most.